Today, to proceed with the program, I would like to introduce to you the Honorable Mayor Jorge Elorza.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and thank you to everyone for joining us here. I want to begin by recognizing our MC for today, Shondell Bunn Speaks. Shondell is an amazing leader in our community and in my administration, and she's been leading a lot of the work that we've been doing with leaders in the Black community that has brought us here today. Shondell, you are an inspiration every single day. You push us every single day, and along your side, I know there's nothing that we can't accomplish. We'll continue to aim high and really push the envelope on what's possible and what we do. I want to thank our speakers today. Keith Stokes, the Vice President of the 1696 Heritage Group. Keith has been an invaluable thought partner to me personally as I have thought through and worked through what exactly it is that we're doing here today and how the most appropriate way to take these steps are. Keith, you truly are a fountain of knowledge, and I appreciate all of your advice up to this point, and I look forward to continuing to work with you and your network to make sure we advance this work in the most meaningful way possible. I also want to recognize Janice Faulkner. She's the founder and CEO of Impact Rhode Island, and she's an active member of the African American Advisory Group, of which has been meeting every single week. Now, Janice was, in all truth, the first person in that group, at least to speak to me directly about this topic, and I thank you for raising that issue, bringing it to the fore, because even though you're the first one that brought it to me, I know that there are a lot of other people who had it on their mind. And the definition of leadership is always doing the right thing, or taking the initiative to do the right thing, and you did exactly that. So I thank you, Janice. There are a number of people that have to be thanked, so I beg your indulgence for just a second. Behind me is Anastasia Williams, State Representative, right here from this area. Representative Williams has been an outspoken voice at a state level, making sure that as folks feel uncomfortable raising and talking about these issues, that she continues to put it on the table because it's the right thing to do. For that, I thank you, Representative Williams, and it's an honor to have you here with us today. Another leader who has been an incredible thought partner to me, and in many ways a spiritual guide, is Senator Harold Metz, and at times I refer to him as Deacon Harold Metz. Senator Metz is also one of the very first people that I spoke to about this idea, and he was just as encouraging at that moment as he's always been throughout my career, urging me to go forward and to focus on doing the right thing and taking the appropriate steps. Senator Metz, I think I speak on behalf of our entire community to let you know how thankful we are as a community and as a city to have you as one of our leaders and one of our public servants. So thank you for being here as well. I also want to recognize the president of the Providence NAACP, Jim Vincent. Jim is also an active participant in the African American Advisors Group that we meet with regularly. And in conversations that I have had with him, not just as part of that group, but also directly via phone, he's been extremely helpful in helping me think about the significance of this and how to frame this so that it truly meets the moment. President of the NAACP, Jim Vincent, thank you for your selflessness and all of the work and energy that you put into lifting up our entire community through your work with the NAACP. Thank you so much, Jim. I also want to recognize another partner in city government, Councilman Pedro Espinal. Councilman Espinal is new to the City Council, but he has hit the ground running. And Councilman, you always seem to be on the right side of issues, fighting the good fight, and never afraid to jump right in when you're called to. So thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing to move this work forward along your side, because it's going to be challenging at certain times, but I know you're just the man to help us through that process. And I also want to recognize Bishop Jeffrey Williams. Bishop Williams is actually the first person that I spoke to when I started developing this idea, and he was encouraging from the very first moment. He leads all of our African American advisor calls, and your voice and wisdom is just so helpful, and frankly it's also very soothing, because these are challenging issues and sometimes it gets tense. But you seem to soothe that tension. It's just part of your nature and part of your way. We appreciate you very deeply, so thank you, Bishop. So I apologize in advance if I've failed to recognize anyone important, but frankly, everyone here is important, and all of you will be an integral part of this process going forward. So I want to talk about how it is that we got here. Of course, these last few months have been extremely difficult for all of us. And then ever since we all saw that horrific George Floyd video, things got even more tense and got even more difficult. At that moment, we made a commitment as a city to listen deeply, with an open mind and with an open heart, to leaders in the Black community and hear what exactly their experiences have been, and to hear it in their own words. As part of that, through these weekly meetings with the African American leaders, we have come up with a number of really creative, really forward-thinking, and progressive ideas of how to move this work forward. Just several weeks ago, we stood on the steps of Providence City Hall, signing an executive order eliminating the word Providence Plantations from all references to the state name. That idea and that initiative came directly from the conversations and from the voices of Black leaders in our community. And as we've continued to have conversations, what I've been so incredibly moved by is the fact that the experiences that many people refer to as history are alive and unfortunately well today. They run deep, but it's not just deep into the past, it's also part of our present moment. And so I became convinced, just as so many other folks in this group, that if we really want to make the most out of this moment, then we have to get to the root of the issue. We have to get to the heart of the issue. And we simply can't avoid conversations because they make folks uncomfortable, because they're difficult, or because they're uncertain and we don't know where they're going to lead. If anything, it makes it all the more important to take on these challenging conversations. And as we stand here today, I'm also very much cognizant that the steps that we're taking today as a community are steps that, to the best of my knowledge, not a single city in the United States has undertaken. So what we're doing here together is truly something historic. But most importantly, it's something that comes directly from the voices of our Black community. So today, in just a few moments, I will be signing an executive order committing the city to a truth, reconciliation, and reparations process. And I want to spend some time talking about each step of the process because it's very, very important. The first step of this process will be the truth. In my conversations with Keith Stokes and with other members of the Rhode Island Black Heritage Society, the Rhode Island Historical Society, and other historians, they tell me that much of this work has actually already been done. So we're already ahead of the curve. The truth process is going to have us look not just at the experience of slavery, but beyond that as well, to the experience of Jim Crow, housing discrimination, and structural racism that pervades every aspect of our society. And just as important as looking into the past will be creating the link between the past and the present, and acknowledging that history is not just a thing of the past, but it actively shapes today. All of this information will be compiled and made broadly accessible to the public. And we've had many conversations about how inclusive and how broad this should reach. Should it be, and how do we define the terms? Should it be African American, African heritage, black people, indigenous people, people of color? The group took an informal vote just last week, and they voted to be as inclusive as possible. However, let this be clear, that what brings us here today is the pervasive and systemic injustices against the black community and a pervading anti-blackness that exists in our society. So as we go through this truth process, the focus will be on the experiences of the black community. And unfortunately, oftentimes, those who discriminate don't discriminate, meaning that if you discriminate against one group, you tend to also discriminate against other groups. And so the voices of other folks who have been discriminated against, they will be brought into the narrative and into the truth by focusing on the experiences of the black community. That's the first step. The second step is the reconciliation stage. And at this stage is where we hope to engage the broadest number of people in the Providence community as possible. This is important for a number of reasons. Many people, we have to acknowledge, simply don't find themselves in spaces where they can hear directly about the depth of the crisis and the profound impact that this has had on real people here in our community. We will follow the model of other nations, South Africa, Rwanda, North Ireland being some of them, and some private institutions such as Brown universities that have gone through this reconciliation process. We hope to not just bring individuals together, but to bring in institutions, both private and nonprofit, that may not know how to engage, but want to be allies. Through this reconciliation process, we will highlight the interconnectedness of our community. In fact, the very, very idea that we cannot live separate from each other because we are interconnected to our core. And if the coronavirus crisis has taught us one thing, is that if your neighbor is sick, you cannot feel safe. And the same is true for our society. But it goes even deeper than that. And it's not just a matter of your personal safety or your personal security, but it's also a matter of our own identity. How we see and feel about ourselves is impacted by the plight of others. It is impossible to feel a deep sense of satisfaction about ourselves or about the world if our neighbors are struggling, hurting, and dying. The reconciliation process will allow us to look at ourselves with clear eyes and match our highest ideals of who we want to be with the reality on the ground. My sense is that we'll find that we have a long way to go to meet those high ideals. I believe in a fundamental goodness that exists in all of us. And when confronted with the reality of the systematic injustices that our black community has faced, our broader community will respond to be part of the solution. Which brings us to the last stage and the last step of reparations. And I want to be clear about this step because it's a step that is the most likely to be misconstrued, and certainly by people who oppose this work or inclined against it. It's the most likely to be ridiculed or reduced to the absurd in order to undermine this whole effort. But we're not going to let them do that. There are many questions about reparations, such as what kind of reparations there will be, what form they will take. Will they be checks to individuals? Will they be investments in the community? How much will they be? And who qualifies? These are all legitimate questions, but they are questions for another day. Today's announcement is a commitment that we're making to a process. And as we go through this, a process will be developed for recommendations to be made. And those recommendations will take into account what the scale of those recommendations should be, the shape that they should take, and the eligibility for those same reparations. And then after we as a city receive those recommendations, it will be our responsibility to act on them and to make them a reality. Today we are putting a marker on the ground and publicly stating that we're committed to elevating this conversation to every aspect of the work that we do, to confronting the truths of the past and the present, and to using the levers that we have at our disposal to right the wrongs of the past and to right the wrongs that have inflicted pain in our black neighbors. As we work through these steps and as we work through this process, I am cognizant that people want to see action now. We will not wait for the process to be completed and fully over before we take steps wherever we can. We will continue to listen to our black community and to our black leaders and address concerns as opportunities present themselves. As we begin this process, I am also cognizant that no other city in the United States has done this before. Other than perhaps 2 cities that have done certain parts of this work, no other city, to the best of my knowledge, has made a commitment quite like the one that Providence is making today. Together, we are blazing new trails, and we are certainly heading into the uncertain, but we are certainly heading into the optimistic. Many of you know that I have a 2-year-old at home, and having a 2-year-old at home, I have to admit that I've been watching a lot of Disney Plus lately and a lot of cartoon movies. Some of you may have watched the movie Frozen 2. In the movie Frozen 2, as the spirits are awakened, the town of Arendelle is thrown into chaos. And so the town consults with a wise troll. A sage troll comes to the scene, and he's asked to look into the future and what it's going to be. He looks into the future, but doesn't see any clarity. And he makes the point that whenever the future is uncertain, all you can do is the next right thing. And that's what we are doing today, the next right thing. We're doing it because it's the right thing, and we're doing it now because it's the right time. I want to thank all of the leaders in the black community. I want to thank all the leaders throughout our community, and I want to thank every member and every resident of the city of Providence for being with us through this process. This will make us a more resilient, a stronger, and a much more united community. I look forward to going through this uncertain but optimistic process together. Thank you all.